Okay, howdy everybody. I'm Matt and 3NWV, and here we are on the POTA YouTube channel with Leon, KC3QXO. Good evening, Leon. How are you today?
Good evening, Matt. I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
Oh, well, it's another day in POTA paradise here. For those of you who have been hiding under a rock and haven't caught the news, Leon is, as best as I can figure with the help of the help desk, the first person to have logged in the database an activation in each of the 50 states and also the District of Columbia. So all 51 of the entities that can count for worked all states. So first and foremost, congrats. I mean, that's a heck of an accomplishment. Maybe if you could tell us a little bit about just yourself, your origin story, as it were. How'd you get into ham radio, and just kind of maybe what your current situation is before we get into what possessed you to do this.
Well, I'm a relatively new ham. It will be 2 years this January since I got my technician ticket.
Oh, wow.
Uh, got my general about a month and a half later in February, and I've been running with it ever since. I'm one of those people. I live in a townhouse. I have a homeowners association. I have a stealth antenna out back, but it's just a high noise level here. So POTA is wonderful for me. It lets me get out and get away from the noise and be able to have a good setup.
So only 2 years from technician to to activated all states. That's fairly impressive. At what point did you get the idea that that was going to be your goal? That was the thing you're going to set out to do.
To be honest, it was never my goal was to activate the 48 US states, the continental US. But once I got that done, I found out that there was only one other person that had gotten the certificate, and that's Dave Duncan. And my hat's off to Dave. It was actually within a few hours. The other gentleman, I think, got me by about 4 or 5 hours, if I'm guesstimating correctly. But it came down to that close. It's pretty wild.
But that, honestly, that was sort of the first question that popped into my mind. I know, just cruising around my sort of tri-state area here, Western PA, Ohio, West Virginia, and dealing with the fact that, every state has kind of their own system for how do you find out about their parks and get maps and get the boundaries and stuff like that. I almost can't imagine having to deal with that for 51 different places. Can you talk a little bit about how you picked the parks that you were going to, and like, what did you have to do to find out what you needed?
There was no planning. I really didn't plan anything. It was long weekends when I'm lucky enough to be self-employed. So when I got a long weekend or holiday weekends, I just took road trips and I did parks. As far as ones I selected, I've been lucky enough to fall into a wonderful ham family in my area, and K3MRK is one of the top chasers on parks on the air. So if you needed a park, that's where I went. I went and got Mark parks. So
That's good. The buddy system. I love it.
we found things along the way, and I activated for him, and I had a lot of help along the way. People spotting me when I didn't have a cell phone signal, and it's just been a great family all around me in this area.
Has on the spotting page, how much of the time would you say you had a cell phone signal versus you didn't?
I like to go to obscure places that aren't activated a lot. So that means there's a reason for it. I would say probably 60% of the time I did, 40 I didn't.
Okay. And when you didn't have a cell signal, what was the plan there? What do you have, sort of a scad with Mark and say, well, I'm going to be here and I'll try this frequency and get somebody to spot you that way, or spin the dial and find an activator, or how'd that work?
We did that when it came. Sometimes I just worked it, called CQ till somebody picked me up and spotted me, or sometimes that didn't happen at all. So, you got to do what you got to do when you're out there. I had one activation in Rhode Island. We had a solar storm or something just killed the bands. I was up there for 4.5 or 5 hours making 10 contacts, and I think that's all I made. I might have made 11. So it's not always fun out there.
Yeah. Well, that was actually my next question is, I mean, I guess with the traveling, you're pretty committed to, hey, I went here and I'm at the park and I'm gonna have to tough it out until I get my 10. So, were there any do-overs? Did you have any just complete and total busts where you had to try again?
I did, Georgia, and I'm not gonna try the name of the park, but it's the park where the Appalachian Trail begins, or the lead into the Appalachian Trail. I
Okay.
was there last year and I failed there. My battery died. It started raining, and it just wasn't going to happen. So I did fail there, but I made up for it this past about a month and a half ago. I went back to that park and made it happen. So I took like 5 or 6 long weekends, and I did the majority of the country on that. Now I did take 3 weeks towards the end of things and went out west, and I fell in love with the West. We have such a magical, beautiful country, and that's what it was all about for me. It was traveling. I got the travel bug and the ham radio bug all at the same time, and it became
Yeah.
this thing here.
In order to get to, Nevada and California and such things, these are plane rides for you, or
No,
you drove.
I drove everything. The only plane
Wow.
rides I had were to Alaska and to Hawaii. Everything else was driven. I think I did about 40,000 miles to do this.
Wow. Wow. That's quite the investment. Obviously the time to put in all of those miles, but they're not free these days either. How about gear? What sort of gear did you take on these trips, and did it change at all through the course of it?
For the most part, no. I have an IC 7300 that I took with me, and I always had another radio for a backup in case something would happen. So I have a FT891 also. End-fed half waves. I love them. I love them to death. They're easy to put up. They're easy to set up. You're on the air and within minutes. That's my go-to antenna for POTA activations. Now I've played with some other things. I've ham sticks and stuff like that in tough situations, but it's a no tune end fed half wave for me all the way.
The half wave, is that a 40 meter or a 20 meter half wave?
I have a 80 and a 40. I have a 130 footer and the 60
Okay, so what's your plan A and plan B for getting those things up in the air?
Plan A is I have a 40-foot mast with the 60 footer. I can put it on the end of the mast, leaning against the tree, and I'm done. Plan B, if circumstances are correct, potato cannon. I get a rope up into the tree and pull that. I've had that 130 footer, 100 foot in the air out in the field.
How close do you find the tuning on the 80 meter? Like by the time you get up into the 20, 15, 10 meter bands, how close is the tuning to where you want it?
I've never really had issues as long as I keep the feed end within 3 to 5 feet of the ground. It tunes up for me. It's to the point where I don't even check it anymore. It's always there.
Do you have? I will start with the easy one. Did you have a favorite park out of all the ones you went to? Do you have one that just really stands out as that was a great place?
I do, but off the top of my head, I don't remember the name of it. It was a state forest in Utah. I
Okay.
was in a state forest on top of a mountain. I had a 360-degree all around me. It was just gorgeous.
Did you do a couple of places in Utah, or was that just okay, one and I got Utah?
Actually, Utah, I think I only did one in Utah. Some states I
Okay.
did several, but I was also vacationing too, so it wasn't all about parks on the air. So
Sure. Well, how about the flip side of it? I mean, you had the one activation in Georgia that totally went bust, and there probably were at least a couple that were difficult to find, if nothing else. But did one stand out in your mind as like, oh man, I'm glad this one's over?
well, the one in Rhode Island, yeah, where we had the solar storms or whatever happened that day and it killed everything. That was pretty horrible. I mean, that was not a fun experience. I mean, it was
Yeah.
still fun when it's playing radio, but it was not as far as activation a fun
Yeah.
experience.
Did you spend any time like, lost or wondering if you were in the park, or how
I
hard was it to get where you were going?
No, not really. I mean, I was doing the bigger parks. I was doing state parks when I was out west, and they're well defined. So no, I never had any real problems with that. You get into the national forest, it's just forever, forever you can see. So that's not a big problem. But
Yeah.
I'd travel around until I'd find a cell signal a lot of times, so I could spot myself. I wasn't going to the first decent looking place that I found.
Sure. Sure. What about operating modes? Was this a sideband mission, or was there some CW or digital or anything else in there?
I am proud to say that I activated every state using single sideband. Now, my activation, the one that counted in Alaska, there were some FT8 calls in there, but the next day I activated single sideband. So it was single sideband.
There you go. Even Hawaii, I guess. That's usually the one that that requires the digital to get through.
Yes, I think Hawaii, it's just a matter of waiting till the end of the day, waiting till later in the day till you get propagation, because I was out in the morning over there and it was nothing. And I sort of panicked the first day. It's like, what if I fail in Hawaii? And that's the biggest thing. It's like, you made this investment to get there, and it's like, you can't fail. We can't have the ham gods come down on us.
So, what about like DX type QSOs? I mean, by the time you get to Hawaii, you almost think that, work in Japan is going to be as likely as California. But were there other places that you were that the DX seemed better, whether it was conditions or location or whatever?
I think Hawaii, if I would have had time, I was only there for 2 days. If I would have had more time later in the day, there were great possibilities. But I got New Zealand while I was down there. I had a contact from Japan on FT8 when I was in Alaska. I made the trip to the East Coast from Hawaii on voice. Later in the day, I was getting my friends back here that needed Hawaii and Alaska, so that was sort of neat. I was able to help out some of my friends get their activate all states.
What would you say your QSO ratio looked like across the bands?
I made my activation in Alaska and Hawaii on 17 meters. It opened up for me. So both of them voice calls on 17 meters. 20 meters when I'm trying to get my people back home. So if I'm working, I'll work whatever band that gets to them. 40 meters when I'm activating around home, I usually just work 40 and 20, but out and about on some other stuff.
Now, 17 meters is not a naturally resonant band on an end fed halfway, but I guess it's close enough between 20 and 15 it tunes for you, huh?
I don't know what magic they perform, but my antenna tunes 2.0 and below on all of the bands. I'll throw it out there. I bought it on eBay. It's a Nelson antenna. He makes great products.
Yeah.
But it tunes up on all of them just fine.
Great. Well, clearly got the job done. So that's awesome. What about batteries? So you were out and about quite a lot. You must have put some wear and tear on the battery. And for Alaska and Hawaii, you got to deal with flying with your batteries. So what's the story there?
Well, that's an interesting story. I took 2 batteries with me, a 6 amp hour and a 5 amp hour, which were within the legal limits. They never checked me. They never checked anything as far as size of the batteries. I could have gone bigger, but then, if they would have, it would have been a problem. But I was in 3 airports and they never checked me once. I went right through the luggage. Sort of proud that I managed to carry a ham radio, all my equipment, clothing for 2 different climates in a carry-on bag and a backpack to Hawaii and Alaska. No check luggage at all.
There you
I
go.
had 2 bags and that was it. So they weren't getting my equipment lost.
Yeah. What would you do differently? What advice would you give to somebody who's headed out there?
Just have fun. Just have fun with it. Don't worry about it. I mean, it's not breaking new ground at this point anymore. So just have fun with it. Have a good time. Plan it if you want to plan, wing it if you want to wing it. It's just a matter of getting out and doing it.
Well, when would you say this effort started?
My first activation was at the Gettysburg Battlefield on July 4th of 2021. So that's when it started. It was about 17 months for me to do the 51 states.
If you're doing that many activations, it obviously would be sort of convenient to log electronically, but it's one more thing to carry. So which way did you go for logging? Did you take the tablet or the laptop or the pencil?
I have a small laptop I keep with me. I run FT8 on it when I need to, and
Yeah.
I can't read my own handwriting. That's out of the question.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the other big question is, so what's next, right? You knocked out a big one there. Are
Well,
you burned
there's
out, or do you have a new plan?
there's something I didn't tell you. I never really intended to activate all the states, but I opened my mouth on a New Year's Eve net, and my resolution was activate the Connell US. So I sort of stuck my foot in my mouth, and I almost had to do it at that point, but I never really intended to do Hawaii and Alaska until I found out at the very end. All along, I figured, they were 5, 10, 15 people that had done this already. So like I say, I had no clue who had done it or how many people had done it.
So no plan, but there wasn't a plan for this. So who knows what will happen? New Year's
I
Eve is
am
coming up. You got to be careful.
I am toying with the idea, and I'm not saying I'm going to do it, but activate all references in PA. I think there's 480 of them. I have about 135 done already. So I'm going to peck away at that. I don't know if it's even possible to do them all, but I'm going to try to do that.
Okay, well, I don't want to keep you here all night and keep you on the spot, but do you have any? Is there a funny story, just one anecdote you want to share with folks of hey, in Oklahoma, I only had one boot or whatever.
Well, actually, there is. When I was doing my activation in Texas, I was in a wildlife management area, and I think I rolled into somebody's encampment homestead, and they didn't really like me there. And this was one of those occasions where I didn't have a cell phone signal. So I texted my buddy back here, Ray, W3RSH, and said, Ray, can you spot me? I says, these people are starting to shoot guns and stuff around me. I just want to get this done and get out of here. So he spotted me and we got it done, and I got out of there. But
there you go.
But
That's
yeah,
pretty funny. Well, yeah. So there's that. What about the park staff? Did you run into much in the way of park staff in your travels? And if so, what were their thoughts on what you were doing?
not really. Usually when I talk to, I've only really had one encounter where I had any kind of, I wouldn't say bad reaction. He just didn't understand the point. That was a Pennsylvania game warden, but they're receptive to it. Anything that gets people into their parks, they're happy for. So I've never had any kind of issues with any rangers, forest rangers, park rangers, game wardens, anything like that. No,
Yeah,
they're
no,
usually happy.
that's good to hear. That's been my experience too. So for those of you who read the horror stories on Facebook, remember they're like plane crashes. You hear about all of them, not the thousands that go well. So keep that in mind. Okay, well, hey, I'm going to say congratulations to you one more time. It's a great accomplishment, and I guess like I said, New Year's Eve is coming up here, so we'll see if you make any more wild promises. I guess I'll give you. I had some great success a couple of years ago. I made a New Year's resolution never to make another New Year's resolution.
That sounds like a good one.
It's the only one I've ever kept. So far, so good.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you so much, Leon. This has been great.
How'd I do?
You did great. You did absolutely great. It's it's a good story, and there's a lot of people who are going to be jealous, to be perfectly honest with you.
I heard that a lot.
Not just of the certificate, but of, the experience.
Well, and you know what? It was just amazing. It really was. I was panning for gold in California on the American River where the gold rush strike started out there. And I got a little bit of color too, something I always wanted to do. So it's
great. Well, that's just it. I mean, even the POTA part is a blast, I'm sure. There's honestly not that many people that can say they have been to all 50 states and DC. I've traveled a lot for work and personally, but I haven't been to every state. I've never been to Idaho, so
it's you think of Idaho as being potato land, but It's a lot of beautiful mountains there too. It's the West. I'm completely in love with the West. I'm going back there as often as I can.
Good.
Know all about that. All right. Well, you have a great
Good.
evening, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Leon. Take care.
Bye bye.